Hey guys, it's time for another Centurions Man and Machine Podcast Xtreme episode. Here with my good friend. This time it's not Mark, but it's Nick. Hey Nick, how's it going?
Hey man, how are you today? I'm good.
All good, all good. Actually, this will probably be a really exciting episode. Not that the previous ones weren't, but we're getting ready to review the 80s Commanders by Ramen Toys, which are probably the first actual action figure homages or third-party releases of the Centurions since the original line, if we don't count Jarek's Lego type figures, which are, more abstract. So I'm pretty excited. How do you feel before we get started? How are you excited about, looking at the good, the bad, and basically you already have the figures in hand? I have too. How do you feel about it?
Been wanting to talk about these figures for a while. It seems like there's a certain niche of collectors that bought into these, and a lot of people bought it. There doesn't seem to be that much feedback going around regarding these figures.
Right. So I think we should, and we discussed this before the episode. So, Nick, would you mind just summarizing how this whole thing started with Ramen Toys, showing up and essentially announcing the figure out of the blue, and up until the figures arrived, the whole pre-order thing, the early bird special. Can you just give our listeners basically a summary of how these figures happened?
From I guess my interpretation or how I remember the events offhand, these figures were announced out of the blue for 80s Commanders, and all of us were thrown off, completely surprised that somebody was going to attempt to make updated versions of Centurion figures, because as you pointed out, we haven't seen nothing since the original release from Kenner, or if you want to count Jarek Neo's Lego figure, that's all we've gotten over the years. So a lot of fans, we were all excited to see this project, and Ramen, they've been really good about that. They kept us up to date. They've shown us their designs from every step of the process. They've been pretty good to the fans about being telling us what we're going to be getting and all that stuff. So it was an interesting about a year we had to wait for these figures. So
Probably yes.
Yeah, I don't think it was that bad of a time frame either. I think they ran 1 month behind on shipping the figures, which, if you look at other toy companies, 1 month, that's nothing. Other companies are running months behind. So, yeah, said and done. You announce these figures, we get them in hand, but less than a year later, I thought that was pretty quick, man.
Definitely. I think it would compare to the Hasbro Kickstarter projects that they did, the HasLab projects, because I think they are also announced and then shipped probably a year after, because they have to first see if enough money has been put together for the molds to be commissioned, and then they go through the whole cycle of creating a new toy from beginning to end after enough backers show up. So I think this was actually pretty realistic. So yes, if you haven't seen these figures yet or don't know the entire story, the idea was that supposedly Ramen Toy is made up of two guys. One is Ace, who now we know is called Noel, and his friend, who is still anonymous. We hope that it's not Dog Terror or a hacker, but there's no verification for this yet. And so they showed up, and supposedly they have toy production experience and some experience in the toy business. And they announced these figures. And so then we had the option to essentially do an early bird order, which was how much was it? 65,
I believe.
65. And then there was the full price if you didn't participate in the early bird offer, which was 90.
Around 95 or something
95.
like that.
So at first, my impression was that this is pretty steep for a Transformers figure. Of course, Hasbro has a different budget and different price ranges, so this would feel more like a Kickstarter. Still, you could buy a Commander class figure for this price and maybe a small figure to go with it. For GI Joes, you could buy 3 GI Joe figures, which are taller than the '80s Commanders. So that was my first thought. That I understand. I'm patient, with ramen, but yeah, this is a bit expensive. But if the results are fantastic, then I'm more than willing to pay this price. Nick, what was your impression? How did you feel? So you have been a toy collector for way longer than I, so you probably have seen more fluctuation in the prices of toys in the past 30 years.
Well, I'm gonna be honest. Even at $65 on the early bird special, that's pricey for a 6-inch scale action figure. Right, like I think right now, Super 7, they've kind of jumped to that price point around what, $50 now. They're going to be asking for their GI Joe and their Silverhawks figures, which I know a lot of people are like, dude, that's expensive. You know what I mean? That and I would agree that's definitely pricey. But gotta keep in mind, this is going to be definitely more of a much smaller scale production than what Super 7, or Hasbro, or any other company's doing. These are, I mean, these are all, we don't know the numbers. They never gave us the exact numbers, but it's safe to say it's definitely going to be a smaller production, just going based upon the feedback and the replies that they were getting and on all that stuff. So I was happy when I saw these figures. I know a lot of people were exactly not happy because they chose to go with a modern, artistic style on these figures, and a lot of people they're kind of set in their ways that they want straight up vintage style. They want the vintage uniforms, they want the vintage colors, and I get where they're coming from, and part of I agree with a lot of their sentiments on that. But me, I thought that this was an interesting design aesthetic for him. More of a little more modern look. The colors being a little toned down and more of a, not as bright, loud. Let's face it, Kenner was a toy line. It's not going to be Kenner bright. So I was okay with that. I was all right with the color choices. A lot of people weren't happy that they used a single body for all 3 characters. But this is the company's first release. So, you gotta cut corners wherever possible. And it really it worked for these figures. Using the same body, worked. It was the original figures had they were close to the same design anyways. Don't get me wrong, there were artistic designs between all three of them, but it worked. Using the same body worked for these figures. It kept the company or Ramen. It kept the production number down low, and it gave us the opportunity to get these figures. If they would have gone with unique body designs for all 3, I would imagine that these figures would have costed a lot more than the initial early bird $65 or the retail $90.
You mean if they would have gone with the original scale?
No, I mean unique body sculpts for each figure.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
I see. So originally there were 2 dilemmas. One was the scale. Some people preferred, like I did, the original size. Some people preferred the Marvel scale. And there was another one where some people preferred the original deco. So there are essentially these 2 dilemmas. What should the scale be like? Whether it should be original Centurions scale, which is about 8 inches. How much was that?
The Centurions, I think, were originally around 7 to 8.
7 inches.
7 to 8. I can't remember exactly, and all my Centurion figures in the other room, so can't really measure them at the moment. But I think it was like towards 7 to 8 inches. Yeah, the original figures were 7 to 8 inches.
Okay, so the original figures were 8 inches, and the dilemma was go with the original scale or go with the Marvel scale. The other dilemma was should they go with the original colors or a more updated modern paint job. You followed them more closely on Facebook. Do you have an estimate or a personal guess regarding which one was more popular or which group was more vocal? Since we now know what the results are: Marvel scale, and 6-inch size, and this modern kind of dirty, smudgy look. Do you know like whether this group was more vocal or the other people just never spoke up? Like, what's your impression?
Uh, from what I perceived, the scale was definitely more people were vocal that they wanted a smaller scale. They wanted to go to the six inch scale because that is the most popular scale right now. As Hasbro is pretty much almost mainly dominating the action figure market. All their figures are roughly in that scale. So a lot of toy collectors are, they're collectors of that scale. They wanted to see these figures in that scale. So Ace over at Raymond listened to the fans, read his, listened to the people, what people had to say. So he dropped the scale per what people wanted. Me, I could care less. They could have been the original scaled with the original figures, or this scale that we got here, the 6-inch scale. Either way, I'm happy with it. It didn't matter to me. It is nice to be able to kind of pose these with GI Joe classified, Ghostbusters, Marvel figures. You know what I mean? It's nice to be able to interact these figures with others for photographing purposes or display purposes on your shelf. So it didn't bother me. Now the colors there was definitely a lot of people very vocal about the colors, and from my interpretation, I would say more people wanted the anime or toy color. I mean, the animation and the toy colors were about the same, so more people wanted. Let's just call it, the vintage style. More people wanted the vintage colors.
So I think for Transformers they call it cartoon accurate.
Yeah, we can go with that term. You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
So
Yeah.
more people wanted cartoon accurate, but Raymond was in their view, these were modern representations, and this is what they saw these figures as being, not such bright colors, more toned down colors. So that was in their vision from the beginning, and that's what they went with. So, but yeah, there was definitely, I would say, a lot more people were vocal that they wanted the cartoon style coloring versus what they got here.
Right. So then we pre-ordered the figures, those of us who went for the early bird option, and then others who were more hesitant, especially because news were trickling, step by step. And first we've seen only sketches, then black or monocolor unpainted renders, then colored renders, then test shots, then unpainted production samples, then painted production samples, and then finally the final figures. So those who essentially wanted to take the risk paid the 65-ish price, $65, and the other group, like Nick, decided to wait it out, just be wise, and see where it goes, and then they paid the $95. And so around December-ish, I think the figures shipped out and arrived to people's designated addresses. To me, since I was out of the country, this was delayed, and I could only open them recently. And my first impression when opening them was that the shipping solutions that Ramen found was pretty, satisfying. I have to say that I sometimes, maybe once a year or once every 2 years, I order stuff from AliExpress, Alibaba, the Chinese Amazon, so to say. And they usually use a service called ePacket, which is a cheap option, sometimes not the safest, but I would say that I've had very few items, get lost, and so far have been happy with it. And so I opted for that instead of the more expensive FedEx or UPS option, because I was out of the country and it didn't matter when they came in. So when I finally got them, I was surprised that even though it was the budget option for shipping, they were in mint condition. So the boxes were, I would say, collector's grade quality, no bruises on the boxes, no bends, nothing was bent or damaged. So initially, when I opened the packages, and this, of course, the toys in their cardboard boxes were covered in a plastic bag, each of them. So that was a really positive experience. Nick, what was it for you to open, the package, and how did you which shipping did you choose?
I got the premium, which got shipped DHL. It was definitely, I ain't gonna lie, it was a little pricey. It was about $60,
Wow.
but I think I got these figures in in a week turnover. So that is ridiculously fast. And I had no problem. Don't get me wrong. If I would have got e-package shipped during the holiday season, I would be waiting quite a while to get a hold of these figures, because by the time they come through customs, clear customs, all that fun stuff, DHL kind of is more, it expedites that process a lot quicker. I got no problem. I'm not saying nothing bad about the price of shipping. It's, you're getting it from what, China, or what was it? Yeah, China, right?
Yeah.
I'm in the Ohio area, in the United States. I'm in the state of Ohio, so I'm not complaining. $60 to get it here from China to here in a week, no problem. The packaging, they were packed beautifully. Each box had a plastic cover around them. Then they were all placed in the shipper box. The corners had protection on them, so the corners wouldn't get bent up at all. So no, these were packed with care. They did a good job packing these. I've seen better shipping from this company than I've seen from Amazon here, or even some other leading toy companies that I got stuff ordered from. They did a wonderful job.
That's very true. And when you look at these boxes, they're pretty nice. They're aesthetic, and their color selection looks like the popular synthwave style that's really popular nowadays. So it's this purplish, pinkish, hazy colors, and kind of neon, from like the 80s, or supposedly it's like one of these like retro futuristic styles. And so the box itself looks really nice, and it features the art for the figures. If you pre-ordered it with the early bird special, you get an extra sticker in the boxes of the figure, because each of the figures arrived in separate boxes. And when you looked at the front of the box, that's what you saw: the name of the figure, the 80s Commanders branding. On the back, however, there were the names of the figures and the description of the weapon system, essentially. So the three figures were Jason Miyokin, who was Jake, Son Byung Min, who was Max, and Roger Statham, who was Ace. Now, this was surprising to me, because they could have just not picked a name for the character. Instead, they chose to create, three new identities, and gave them names. Apparently, I assume that Jason or Jake and Roger or Ace are either American or British, or maybe, someone from Australia or some English-speaking countries. And Max, or Son Byung Min, is Korean, South Korean, I assume. So that was an interesting choice. I think maybe that was also because when we first saw the head molds, a lot of people, including me, were not the happiest, because they did not look like the original characters. Artistic freedom, of course, there's always there. But initially I think maybe Jake was supposed to be even Latino or African American, or just darker skinned. But I think that was there was such a pushback from the fans, or potential buyers, that they changed that. What's your take on that?
Yeah, there was definitely pushback on that one. A lot of people were definitely not happy about that. Changing the names around, I was surprised they even gave them a bio. I don't mean that rudely to the company by any means. I was surprised. I mean, you could have just skipped the bio and just gave us the figures.
There's actually no bio, Nick. There's no bio. There's just a name.
There was a little bit of a bio on the back of the cards.
If I just read for you an
You got your
example.
packages next
Yeah,
to you.
it's in my hand. Yeah. So for example, there's Jake. So it says Jason Miokin, a former Ranger veteran, dons his Sentinel Industries CENA combination exosystem by neural activation exosuit and combines with the Sentinel Systems Challenger unit, an ordnance system with the firepower of an infantry platoon.
Sounds like a bio
Uh,
to me right there.
Yeah, but we don't really know much about the character. We don't know where he's
Right.
from. He's just supposedly a former ranger, so that assumes that he's
Okay, well, let me restate what I was saying then here. To even put that on the box kind of surprised me. I just figured you to give us the figures and call it 80, air commander or sea commander or land commander, and that would be it. So having anything else like that kind of really surprised me. I don't, and not like I said, it's a nice touch. It's nice that they took the time to do that.
yeah. And I checked the boxes now. Ace is a fighter pilot, so I assume that again he could be from anywhere, any English-speaking country. And Max, even though he has a Korean name, no English, first names, he is a former SEAL. So that assumes that he's also American, just with a different heritage. So yeah, again, like I was open to new aspects of the characters or new, you know, interpretations of the characters, but if I need to spend a lot of money on figures, I would have preferred to go with the original characters, the original aesthetics, and not a Power Rangers type reinterpretation. And Ramen mostly delivered on that. I mean, two American guys, because for me as a European, like there was still, as a child, there was still this glorified impression of the US. So to me, it was cool to see these guys, and of course they were Americans, so it was cool to to look at them and be like, oh yeah, that's why America is like number one, blah blah blah, as a kid. And so to me, just like shattering that image and making it like an international, whatever not Power Rangers, but more like Captain Planet and the Planeteers type gang would have been a letdown. But if characters don't really, if especially if you ignore the names, which aren't bothersome anyways, they look pretty okay to me. Jake looks fine. Ace looks fine. Max, I would say, looks like a Korean or an Asian Tony Stark. I think I was the first one to mention that. So that was a bit weird, especially because there's like, with Ace and Jake, they kind of sort of look the part, but with Max, he looks very different from the Tom Selleck impression that Max originally was. So so yeah, do you think that commissioning molds that were not precisely on point with the originals was a necessity, or that was the best that they could do, or they initially had an idea to create a new interpretation of the characters and then couldn't step back because they blew the budget on the original molds? What's your assumption?
I don't know. It's they Ace, if I remember correctly, did come out and say that, hey, this is what we can afford for the caliber of a sculptor, and this is what he was able to pull off. Because I know a lot of people griped about the quality of the way the heads look, and to me, yeah, they could have been better. The heads are definitely not the best part of these figures, or the best sculpting part of these figures, but I mean, I tend to give them a little bit of a pass because it's a new company and it's their first product. But the eliminating the Tom Selleck mustache on the Max Ray character was to me a little bit of a disappointment. It's iconic. That's part of the man's look. He was, if I remember correctly, Alton, who was a designer for Centurions, even admitted that his appearance was based upon Tom Selleck. So, doing away with that mustache was kind of a bad call, in my opinion. I would have kind of preferred to kept the mustache on it instead of this like Tony Stark goatee style on them. But Ace, I mean, I could see a resemblance to the original character, or where the inspiration came from. Same with Jake. I can see where the artist or the sculptor or whatever the design had an inspiration from the original. So I mean, like I said, to me it was a touchy topic with a lot of collectors. For me, it didn't bother me that bad about the helmets, the heads being not the greatest looking.
Right, and it's one of those things that especially nowadays, it's topical to go into the politics of it. So, and this is not about that. So it's more like what's your preference? Are you more old school, or are you more into reinterpretations? Like I think our co-host Mark probably would have also enjoyed the new interpretation. Different ethnicities, etc., etc. But essentially, the great thing about these figures, whether you like the new heads or the old heads, is that if you want to replace them, and if there's money, if you want to invest money in replacing them, and Ramen creates new heads, which we'll talk about later, because there's a bunch of heads, on their way probably to people who weren't happy with the first molds. You can just simply pop the head off and replace them, and there you go. You don't have to replace any of the other parts. Which,
Well, going based upon the feedback from in the Centurions Power Xtreme Facebook page, most collectors displayed their figures with the helmets on, anyways. So a lot of
true.
people were upset and let down by the quality of the head sculpts, but a lot of them at the same time was, well, I was going to display with the helmets on anyways. So I get it. Don't get me wrong. If you're paying $90 a figure, or 65 if you're an early birder, yeah, you're gonna want better quality sculpts. I get where people come from on that one, and I get a lot of the complaints that had been generated from that. But as I said before, and the first release of this company. I'm finding myself trying to be lenient and see where they're gonna go with the next release. Yeah, and based on like that statement right there, as we're seeing with the Silverhawks on Quicksilver, the head sculpt on that figure is far better than has more of a resemblance to the original than the '80s Commanders did to Centurions, because well they got money after releasing these figures. They were able to invest in the better sculpt, or they read the negative remarks and realized, okay, we got to work on our head sculpts better. I mean, one or the other. Who knows?
Yeah. So we did have, I wouldn't say a dilemma, but we did discuss this a couple of times before recording the podcast with Nick, that essentially we do want to be fair, and we do want to be critical, but we also want to be understanding of what this feels like. And we were discussing like whether to pull punches, because we didn't want to ooze negativity. There have been a lot of comments from collectors, both encouraging and discouraging. Some people even commented without actually buying the toys or intending to buy the toys. But definitely, I think, Nick, we should, whenever the criticism is due, I think we should definitely mention it. This was a mistake on Ramen's part, that they went with the these alternative head sculpts. But and that was a mistake. That was definitely a mistake. But they did invest. Not they didn't pocket the money. They were like, okay, if collectors are willing to verbalize this, and are especially willing to pay for this, then we'll get a new set of heads for them. And so they did invest money into sculpting the new heads, and they are going to be available hopefully sometime later this year. Which if you do that with Hasbro or any other, even NECA, or some of these other boutique toy companies, they wouldn't be like, oh, we're going to like release an add-on pack or anything. They're just like, yeah, whatever, let's move on. So that's one bad thing and one good thing. So even though they kind of made this little blunder, they are more than willing to make up for it. And I think that's a really good thing about Ramen, that despite all despite one or two mistakes that they did, there is definitely a sign that they're willing to work with the collectors and, you know, kind of, I wouldn't say redeem themselves, but because that's not the right expression in this situation, but kind of to cater to the collector's wishes. And so we'll talk about it later. I think we should definitely talk about it when we review the figures. But you know, they did announce that there would be a second wave of figures using the original molds but modified, so retooled them to have the heads match the original heads of the 86 era characters, and also have the helmets match, which I think is a big thing, because you just said, Nick, that a lot of people would display these figures with helmets on anyways. And you know, even then I did feel kind of slightly let down because of the identical helmets, and that the helmets look kind of weird, especially with two kind of antennas or kind of two little spikes at the bottom of the masks. Uh,
You're talking about, yeah, the like the tube sticking out on the sides.
yes, yes, those
Yeah.
tubes. Yeah,
I'll be honest with you, on the Max Ray figure, to me, it kind of like almost like a snorkeling piece. I thought that was kind of cool that they added that on there. The fins on the top of the helmet, you know, it was an interesting touch. But then you added them also on the Ace, and then you added them on a Jake, and I thought that was kind of a bad call because they're not using the same helmet. You know what I mean? They're actually, a lot of people assume that these were all three of them were going to have the exact same helmet, and that's not the case. If you really look at them, they're all three different helmets. It's just the that added to, you know, like I call it the snorkeling tube, and putting it on Jake and Ace was kind of to me like, what are you guys doing on that one? Max, I thought that was kind of a cool little touch.
I would say that that's true. I can agree with that for Max, especially because you know he's a deep sea diver. The snorkeling part would fit his character. I think maybe that helmet was possibly made first and designed first, and then that design element was just copied to the other two. I do think it doesn't look good on Jake, especially because you know each helmet is a bit different. So especially if you look at the 86 figures, the original Ace helmet looks like a pilot's helmet. So there's this kind of there's this slope on the mask, on, you know, especially that goes, you know, in front of the mouth, that part of the helmet. And
Oh,
for Jake,
it's more well rounded. That's for sure. You know what I mean? It's
yes,
got more of a rounding. It's rounded more.
yeah, it echoes a pilot, you know, a fighter pilot helmet somewhat, or you know, like a, you know,
Well,
without
the man is named Ace, so it
yeah,
only makes
yeah.
sense.
And
So
for Jake, you know, he does have that large grill that I always thought was the coolest, and you know, especially on the figures, there, you know, the emphasis of that grill is taken away by the little, you know, uh, things sticking out of it.
I'm calling it the snorkeling piece.
The
You know,
snorkeling piece, yes, let's call it snorkeling piece. But anyway, so let's just move on because we do want to be mindful of the time. And so when you open the figures, you know, you take out the main part, which is the tray that holds the figures, and you know, you see the elements which, you know, match the original three weapon systems that came with the original characters, and you find an extra head that you can replace. It looks, I think, kind of like young Bruce Willis, or it's a bald guy essentially, and you can use that with the helmets, which are interestingly made up of two pieces that you kind of snap together. Plus, there are three sets of hands. So one is, I think, the fist. Another one is maybe a hand that's holding a weapon, or that's kind of designed to hold a weapon, although we don't know what kind of weapon. Because I tried putting some weapons in the hands, and it's not, you know, a surefire way to hold Marvel scale weapons, or, you GI Joe scale weapons,
They
like
don't need to hold weapons,
classified.
man. Their whole body's a weapon. I said they don't need to hold weapons. Their whole body's the helmet, or their whole body's the weapon.
Yeah, but then why add the hand? That's why I'm
No,
inquisitive
I think
about
it's good,
this.
I mean, for artistic display. If you want to, like Jake, I have him placed with one of the hands kind of partly open, like he's holding on to the rocket on his shoulder, and then like Ace, I got one hand open, one clenched. The like clenched one's like the one's about to fire the stencil missile.
But see, that's the thing. There's the final pair of hands is the open. That kind of like the idle pose, if you want to display them with those hands. And I think those are next to the fist ones. Those are the coolest. So I would say that I don't see a reason to put in an extra pair of hands that kind of are these like middle options. But if it's included in the price, and it's an extra little thing, then I do not mind having those elements, or those extra pair of hands added. Now there's one thing that I do want to highlight. Supposedly, and Ace or Noel did admit this, that the initial production runs included some faulty figures, and those were shipped, which means that some elements, like for example in my case, my Ace's backpack doesn't fit the torso. So the pegs are at a different location where the sockets are on the back of his torso. So that means that the figure is faulty.
Oh,
And
now I want to elaborate on that. Did you try putting another backpack on that figure? Is it the figure being faulty, or is it the accessory being
my
faulty?
my assumption is that the figure is faulty,
Okay.
because and this is a really positive thing. I contacted Ramen, and in a short time, they responded, and they said that they explained the same thing that I just told you guys, and then said that they would replace the part, but they are asking for a bit of time because it's the Chinese New Year and business stops at this time of the year for them. So supposedly they will replace the torso. So, in this case, I sent them a photo of the mismatch, and they immediately assumed that it's the torso, which is the bigger part. So I assume they know what's going on, and it must be the torso. The only other molding issue was, so this was this was Ace, but for Max, the missile on his missile launcher, which by the way are not firing. I think in the group, one person, when we asked an open question preparing for the podcast, he said that unfortunately the launchers don't work. So the missile has a little fin at the end. I don't know if that's a decoration or it's ornamental, or whether it is needed for the missile to hold tight in the launcher. But the end was dented, or disfigured for me, so I cannot push the missile in enough. And Ramen offered to replace that as well after the Chinese New Year. So there are these small mishaps, but I would say that yes, they're a new company. Yes, let's cut some slack. But a good customer service is really important to return the confidence to your customers once they receive maybe some faulty items, or if there's any reason to doubt Ramen's dependability. A good customer service and being there for buyers both before the purchase and after the purchase is really important. And so far, knock on wood, I haven't received the replacement parts yet, but it gives me, it really gives me a sense of optimism regarding Ramen with all the mishaps that happened.
Yeah, there's been a lot of other people express that they have some parts not lining up properly or not fitting right. And by the way, when I say this is based upon the feedback and the group conversations going on in the Facebook group that we're members in. And a lot of people said, the people who have reached out to Ramen, they were told that you would get replacement parts. So yeah, no, that's good that the company, is gonna, send out replacements and fix the issue. So hopefully after the new, the Chinese New Year, those parts ship out, and everybody gets them at a, gets them in a pretty quickly time period, and they just get their parts. But There's been a lot of discussion about parts not lining up on these figures, and I've talked to a few people that have experience in doing sculpting, doing castings, and I also talked to a few people that that worked with tool and dies, and a lot of them suggest that it's a lot. Right now the common belief between a few of these people is that these were used with silicone molds. These were not made out of your typical steel molds. So silicone the mold can warp ever so slightly, where if it was a steel mold and parts didn't line up, it would be very easy to spot that out right away, that the molds didn't line up, because you would see extra flashing of plastic or, whatever. On the silicone, they can bend or shift a little bit, and just ever so slightly, and you wouldn't even really notice it until you try to line up the parts, and then all of a sudden the parts are not lining up. So whether they use steel or silicone, I don't know. I would have asked Ramen or Ace. I'm not sure how we were supposed to address them. Do we call
Noel.
it Ramen as a company, or Noel, or are we calling them Ace? Not to be rude, it's not. I don't want to confuse people when they're listening to this. Of like, what are these guys talking about? But if they would have, if they had the opportunity to join us, I would ask them. And fortunately, life goes on. Noel's in the middle of, I believe he said it was Chinese New Year and move-in. He just didn't have, it wasn't in the schedule to join us tonight. So it's understandable. Hopefully, another time he can join us. But yeah, well, like I said, though, back to my point, though, that's the comic. A few people suspect that the silicone molds might be why some of these parts are just not lining up properly, because the silicone is definitely a lot cheaper to produce than a steel mold. And for this being a first-time product for this company and their first item, it would make sense that they would go with the silicone mold. And I'm not saying nothing bad about that. My figures came out for the most part okay. I do have some issues with my figures that might be a result of the silicone molds. Like Ace, for example, his wrist pegs pop out of his wrist very easily. They stay in the hands, no problem, but they pop out of the wrist of the arm way too easily.
Wait, the wrist peg is in what connects the hand to the arms?
Exactly.
Yeah. I actually went through. I just made my. I just took my photos for an upcoming review, because I will post that one to the group as well, that I just like to do toy photography. And I did go through the hands, and I think only one hand specifically, or maybe two of the 6 hands, had the issue where I'm not saying they would pop out easily, but the peg, instead of connecting to the arm and allowing the hand to come off, or the wrist to come off, that little peg actually sticks into the hand, and when you pull the hand out, the peg goes with it, and as opposed to the peg staying with the arm. So you have to use your teeth, and then just pull it out from the hand, place it back into the arm socket, and then putting in the new hand.
Is that just with Ace, or is that all of them?
I think it's one of Ace's arms and one of Max's arms.
Okay. See, that only happens with just Ace. And with Jake and Max, I have no problems. Those pegs stay in the, that wrist peg stays in the wrist, no problem. I could pop the hands off and put new ones on, and no issues whatsoever. But on Ace, the peg comes right on out. And the other issue I have too is one of the stencil missiles. It's got a much fatter peg than the other one. And originally, I thought it was the port on the arm might have been small, but no, all the weapons fit in that port just fine. It's just one of his red stencil missiles on his arm. The post is fatter than the other one, and you really have to twist to get that thing in there. And even like I got mine in the arm on this lower arm, but you can still see it's not snug. It's just a little too fat. That it won't fit in the hole properly. And then on certain figures, I'm trying to remember, like I think it's my Max Ray. The arms, when you go to pose them, the arms can pop off very easily because it's basically just a kind of like the Masters Universe Origins to how you could take apart the figures. That's how these guys are. You could take off the lower part of the legs, you could take off the arms, you could mix match if you wanted to. You could pop off the torsos, you could pop off the heads. But my arms on like my Max figure pop out, a lot easier than they do on Ace and Jake. So is that a result from the silicone molding, or is that a result of maybe the plastic for whatever reason on that figure or that sheet of color because of that color or whatever is softer than the other ones? I have no clue. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, I have minor QC issues like that. I know I've read online that some people have, the arms pop out a lot easier on their figures, or the lower legs. You know what I mean? Like pop out. Like on Max, if I try to bend his knees, I could pop out the entire leg at the swivel. It pops
Oh
out very
wow,
easily.
I haven't
While Jake
experienced
and
that.
Ace, yeah, Jake and Ace, nope. That leg is not popping off the swivel, but on Max, it pops right out. And like I said, the arms pop out, but yet the wrist pegs stay in nice and tight. So again, is that a result of the silicone molds, or is that a result of the plastic being softer from one color to another? I've got no clue on that one. You know what I mean? But it's a common issue that some people have. Definitely, these parts not lining up, and it's not like it's a wide problem where vast majority of people are experiencing this. It's a small number. It's a very small number of people I have experienced parts not lining up. And Ace, Noel, they've said they give them replacements. I don't know if anyone's actually received their parts yet, because these figures have only been in hand now for less than 2 months, and then the Chinese New Year rolled around. So we'll just have to wait and see if they follow through on that. I would imagine they will, but just got to give it time and see what happens.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts. One is that they did already appear on eBay on in an inflated price range, so people are already like selling them to collectors who don't know about ramen. So that's one thing. The other thing is, sure, so we understand that this is part of the process of creating new toys, especially with a new company. Uh, However, it does make the toys less reliable. And the problem is that, of course, with the larger part, like in my case, with the non-matching backpack and torso, it's obvious that it's great that they offer a replacement. But if it's a small QC thing, like your example of the leg popping out, or like in my case, or in both of our cases, some of the wrist joints popping out, you don't really want to get them replaced, or it's not necessarily like faulty, but it's not high quality. So that unreliability and that kind of slight lack of QC, or lack of using the best quality resources to create these figures does pose a question mark that hopefully later releases will resolve. However, considering the $65 price range for one figure, or the 95, it's definitely one of those things where you do consider these aspects before buying the toy.
Yeah, these definitely do not have the same quality as a Marvel Legends or anything like a Hasbro figure. Let's just put it that way, a 6-inch Hasbro figure. They definitely don't have the same quality of a build. I'm not saying knock them, say that the build is bad, but they're definitely not up to par yet with Hasbro. So, and then when you mention the price point attached to these figures, for a lot of people, that's enough for them to go off and say, I'm not buying them, or to complain about it. Again, I think I did point this out earlier, that these were limited, these weren't mass produced like a Hasbro toy. So I give a leniency to that. No, I mean, that, I mean, you're not selling as many units, say, as a G.I. Joe Classified, or a Marvel Legend, or a Power Rangers Lightning figure. You're not selling as many units. It's this is more for definitely for a collector. You're not going to hand this to a kid to play with, so it's definitely not child worthy to be played with.
Definitely. In other words, I would say that there's the on the one hand, on the other hand, kind of comparison. If you look at it from a collector's perspective who specifically likes Centurions toys, I think, of course, you could disregard these little faults because finally someone took the effort to appreciate, the Centurions community and, create toys for us that are so close to us, even though they're not completely identical to the original releases. That's a good thing that, somebody took the effort to produce these toys. On the other hand, if these were, let's say, third-party Transformers toys or third-party GI Joe toys, these QC issues would definitely deter me from, immediately pre-ordering the figures. Because if you let's say another company decided to create Centurions figures, and there would be now two competing brands of third-party Centurions toys. These aspects would definitely play a larger role and would definitely make a lot of people, look at the other brand potentially, if unless that brand has the same, QC issues. Um, Again, let's just quickly recap and then you move on. The box, if you open it up, it's really nice. It's well designed. It looks considering the boutique nature of Ramen Toy, it looks nice. I like the box. I like the number of accessories because all the three original weapon systems, including Skyknight, Fire Force, and Cruiser. They are, the elements match up. The only missing thing is the spring-loaded missile launcher. Uh, and then we move on to actually holding the figures in this imaginary unboxing. And again, we talked about joints. We talked about some not fitting parts, but I think it's important to mention that the material, the plastic that they are molded from, is light compared to Transformers toys, especially light compared to GI Joe toys, and light compared to Marvel toys. Or actually, this is the lightest action figure.
You're saying the quality of the plastic, like the density
Yeah,
of the plastic.
the light. Yeah, it's no like light. The weight. It's
the
the
density
lightest.
Of the plastic. It's lighter
Yeah,
than
yes,
other stuff.
it's not too dense. So the thing is, this makes it very difficult to pose the figure in an action pose where he's not just standing straight, and you could still place it on your shelf if you don't use a stand, which Nick suggested buying. When I had these issues with the figures, if you don't use a stand, especially like if you are into toy photography, and whether you do it in a photo box or whether you do it outdoors or create your own set, it really makes it difficult to pose these figures, especially because the ankle joints are not too mobile, not too flexible. So if you want to do an action pose, essentially you lack the stability to really do a lot with these figures. Again, you can have, for example, cool poses, like iconic poses, like Jake, maybe or not necessarily iconic, but typical poses like Jake kneeling down maybe to use his bazooka, although oftentimes he didn't, or a lot of cool poses, but they just fall over. And I think that is partially because of the the light plastic, and the lack of density, and also the ankle joints limitations. Because otherwise, the arms are really good at posability. The other parts of the legs are pretty good. The torso is also movable. The heads have a really good range of motion. Unfortunately, the ankles and the weight of the figure, really, compared to the original figures, of course, which had more limited range of motion, makes these figures unstable on the shelf and unstable during photography. So that's a major, warning sign to me, even though I already bought them.
Yeah, I pretty much most action figures these days they can't stand. Let's put it that way. You might be able to get them stand straight in a non-natural pose, like they're doing a police lineup. That's about it. But you try to get them in an action pose, you without a stand, you're not going to have that look. I'm looking over my Joe Classifieds, and every figure is on a stand for a reason. Especially the ones in somewhat of an action pose. Without that stand, they're going to tip over. The 80 commanders are no different. They need stands. I mean, they got nice, big, wide feet on them, and for the most part, my ankle joints are pretty stiff on all my figures. The hip joint now on Ace is starting. The more I played around with them, the looser it started to become. And keep in mind, he's also back heavy. Most of his weapons attack. If you're going to go with a cartoon style set up for your weapon system, Ace is going to be ridiculously back heavy. Same with Max. So if these figures didn't have their stands, they would just tip over right away. So, but I want to throw in something about the stands, and it's not to knock Ramen Toys on this one, because I feel personally any premium 6-inch or taller scale action figure, any action figure really should come with stand. I even said that back in the day with GI Joe. Back in the 80s, every figure should come with a stand. If you got a peg hole on the bottom of that on that figure, it should come with a stand. So,
especially in this price range, I understand that
yeah, this price range,
it's a small company, but I think they would have definitely helped. But Nick, I do have to argue with you strongly here, because you're a collector. I am a collector, and my experience is completely different. I mainly collect Transformers, and most of the Transformers have been really good at posability and joint both joint flexibility and joint stability. So a lot of times I'm able to do like running poses with essentially, which is like just having the figure, lean forward, one of the feet or legs, pulled to the back as if he was running, and he's basically just standing on one single foot. And it looks good because most figures, they're molded in a way, and the plastic is the type of the kind of quality that allows this. So for me, I would say for my Transformers, most of my Transformers, even combiners, are able to, which are big, kind of unstable figures. They are really good at posability and stability. So I would say that no, that's not true what you said, at least from my perspective, my experience. Um, Transformers are expensive toys, but their QC is pretty good, and their posability is excellent. For GI Joe classified, I would also say that I had no problem taking photos of them in my yard, in a natural environment where there's not much. There's sand that you can kind of use to sink their feet in and
but
stabilize
now you're
them.
using the sand as a stand. That
Say
kind of
what?
rhymes. You're using the sand to kind of hold up the figure, and
Yeah,
inadvertently
yeah, yeah,
you're
yeah,
using it
yeah.
as a stand. So now you're kind of cheating on that one.
For GI
So,
Joe, for GI Joes, yes, but a lot of times they didn't even need that when I was, for example, using them on concrete. Or maybe just I used a pile of cement blocks, for example, to create this crypt type or this ancient ruin type thing for my Cobras.
well, let,
And,
let me ask you this question here:
yep.
Would you trust that figure to still be standing if you walked away and came back an hour later, 2 hours
Yes,
later?
yes.
Okay.
For GI Joe Classified, yes. For GI Joe Retro, that they just released, not the Classified Retro, but the regular Retro, they are also lighter than the original figures. But and I do have some issues, even having the collectors club. And now this is a tangent, but even the collectors club figures, they have issues with standing on a stand. Those before the collectors club closed, I got some female Cobra officers and stuff, and troopers, and they have issues, standing straight, because it's such a their limbs are so you know
Skinny.
uh, skinny. Yeah, thank you. So essentially, I would definitely say that and I don't want Ramen to think that I'm bashing the figure, because I think it's, the aesthetics are really good. It's really great that they created this figure, and there are a lot of positives about them. I definitely want to highlight that the weapon systems are very close to the originals visuals, and big kudos for that, because I would have hated for the Jake's missile launcher or a lot of these iconic, or his chest cannon to look different. I would have hated that, but they look really spot on. However, if they could and they would, I would definitely suggest, if the whole silicone mold or versus metal mold thing that you mentioned is true, to invest into more expensive molding and to use a heavier plastic. I know that maybe a lot of boutique toy companies are using this. I think maybe this is ABS. I'm not sure if this is ABS or not.
I don't remember. I want to say, yeah, I think he said it was ABS. He stated a long time ago, before these figures were, being in the production, while they were still being designed and we were getting design sketches, he stated what plastic was going to be used on these figures. So it's not like he deceived anyone. He flat out said, this is what kind of plastic you're going to be getting. So
yeah.
Hey, if I may, when you mentioned the Transformers, though, it's kind of your own. I would have to say you're comparing apples and oranges, because on the Transformers, and I'm looking at my Transformers right now, it's a little unfair to say that, because look at Bumblebee. He's got an entire quarter panel of a car as his foot. You know what I mean? That boy's going to stand no matter what pose you put him in. You know what I mean? Some of these guys got ridiculously big feet, and some of them, they got tiny little feet, Like Warpath, his feet are front quarter section of a tank. You know what I mean? A lot of these figures, they're going to stand. They got nice big feet, robust design feet on them. While G.I. Joe is more on organic human style foot.
I totally get that. I don't think it's apples to oranges, because a lot of Transformers figures have, they don't have excessively large feet. If you look at a lot of recent deluxe or Voyager figures, they sometimes have big backpacks, or kibble, or in the most recent,
they got the heel spur that helps them out.
That's also true. That's also Hasbro's very true.
Wonderful about designing a heel spur. You know what I mean? Putting that on these figures to keep them, so they don't tip over backwards. And
that's also true. But
that's a whole topic that we probably could get on for a whole different podcast.
Yeah,
right there. But
that's true. But I do want to state, Nick, that I think that adding weight to the figures, I'm not an expert in physics, but I think adding weight would have, or density to the plastic would have helped stability. Again,
yeah, they're light. They're definitely. I mean, I'm going to back up what you're saying. Though they're light figures. The plastic used on them is definitely a lot lighter. I don't even know if the word destiny is properly used to describe these, but I said it. Oh well, I'll own up to it. These figures are a lot lighter than what Hasbro's using. The plastic is definitely not as heavy, and it's softer too. You can kind of just feel it in your hands. You know what I mean? It's Marvel G.I. Joe classified versus an 80s Commander. There's a whole. You could feel the heavier plastic coming off the Marvel Legends or anything Hasbro produces. So
one thing I would like to mention, and again, we're getting short on time. I think we can still throw in about 15 minutes to just be slightly over an hour. Nick, what do you think of the following? I do want to mention this to if Noel, if you're listening, or Noel's partner, or Ramen, or anyone essentially. This is just a personal advice, or to anyone essentially trying to get into the toy manufacturing business or toy design business. Do not listen to the fans or a small vocal group of fans that much, because I think, again, I already mentioned that I think scaling them down to Marvel size did hurt the figures. So I think it would have been better to be original Centurion size, but I get it. Marvel scale is what you went with. But for example, the paint job on the figures, I'm not necessarily into the whole dirty look. I don't know. I don't think
the washed look.
The washed look, yeah. So essentially, for those of you who don't have the figure, there's a layer of grime, dirt on the exoframes, and to me, it doesn't really make sense because if you think of a Transformers figure, think of, for example, Optimus Prime. He's been around for hundreds of years, if I don't know, if not longer, or thousands. So of course, if he doesn't wash himself, and I don't know, I don't think robots, at least in G1, have a high sense of hygiene. Dirt accumulates. So Hasbro did release, battle damaged or worn figures. But with Centurions, we're talking about a commando, an elite group of 3 men who actually command one of the highest or most advanced weapon systems arsenal available to mankind. They can teleport anywhere on the globe. They can teleport in weapons and stuff. So I seriously believe that if they have this level of technology, they would not have their gear look dirty. Like if you look at military, like tanks and stuff like that. I haven't been in the military, but I think a lot of times there's the soldiers are told to like keep everything super clean, their weapons, their outfits, even their vehicles, like everything tip top. So to me, them having these outfits and these weapons and everything looking dirty, of course, you might say that they get dirty during combat, but then they get cleaned. So the kind of sticky grime on that, I think, is just missing the point of what the Centurions are about story-wise.
So you're saying that there's an intern aboard Skybolt, and he's got to work. He's got to sit there and clean off all the uniforms when they get back on their missions and wipe down the assault weapon systems.
Yes, I definitely think there's someone whose job is to clean the assault weapon systems. And one thing, for example, and I don't know what you think of this, Nick. For the plasma shell for Jake's weapon system, so the plasma shell technically originally was a spring-loaded missile. You could assume that it's a rocket, even though it says it's a plasma shell. It's a physical rocket, and even the plasma shell is grimy and dirty on the ramen figures. And again, I know this is nitpicking, so I'm not saying that this influences my opinion of the figures, even though I'm not a fan of the grimy look. Why would a missile that Jake almost always fires when he requests fire force? Why would the missile be dirty? Like, is there do they have like a warehouse or a storage facility on Skyvault where they store all the missiles and they're all dirty? Like, to me, even if the whole outfit is for some reason dirty, the single-use shells, rockets, they should not be dirty because they are always restocked. Like how you take a fighter jet and the fighter jet could be somewhat dirty. But the rockets and the missiles should be clean because they're fresh out of the storage facility.
I'm gonna address what you said here, but I'm gonna go a little different approach. These figures really don't have much paint apps on them at all. If you look at the body, it's they're casted in, the plastic it's casted in their colors: blue, yellow, and green. Then they got their secondary color, which on Ace would be like, it's supposed to be silver, but it's gray. That's it. That is it. Adding a little bit of wash to me was an added effort on at least applying some kind of paint where there is nothing. So I didn't mind that. I didn't mind that grimy look to them at all, because it also went to the aesthetic design of these figures. This is a modern representation of the Centurions. And Noel stated that this is going to be a modern representation. The colors were going to be toned down, because if these figures if you really did have a air commander, I don't know, the odds are he would not really be in this bright blue with silver trim on his uniform. And the Sea Commander would just be this bright green with a dark gray undertone. You follow what I'm saying? So they went with the darker colors. The wash was added on as they offer a chance to add paint where it's not there. Also, the wash highlights the sculpts big time. If the, we seen these figures that did not have the wash effect on them, and when you look at them, you barely notice the detail in the sculpts at all. Especially in the weapon systems, you barely notice anything on the weapon systems. That wash now highlighted all the little details. So, like, I got the figures right in front of me right now, and with that wash, I could see all the lines, sculpted on Sky Knight. Where if that wasn't there, I would have to be looking at this thing like pretty much like within inches away of my face to be able to see it. When I'm looking over at Cruiser on Max Ray, all that wash in the yellow brings out all the detail on that weapon system. Same with the orange. It brings out all the little ridge lines, all the little sculpts in the weapon system, and it looks great. Without it, I really believe that these figures would be very bland looking. And I'm very curious to see how the second edition of these figures are going to look without a wash effect. Are we going to be able to see the detail on the weapon systems like we are going to be as you would be right now? Me personally, I don't think the weapon systems are going to look all as good on the second versions as they do right now, because you're not going to see that.
I would definitely agree that that's a valid perspective. So I admit that if you look at them, maybe this dark wash, it does a good job highlighting certain things. I would say that to me, they kind of dilute the effect of them being throwback toys to the originals. They definitely deter from, or they definitely make the figures different. My perspective is that I think it's valid to say that they highlight the figures and make them maybe feel more 3D, or make them feel more, physically, visually impressive. I would still say that I'm, like you said, really curious about how the originals color schemes, or the V2 color schemes would look like, because the original figures from the from 86, they do not have this wash, and I don't think they look cheap or any less imposing than these new figures. So
you're absolutely right on that. However, keep in mind they're scaled bigger. The weapon systems themselves are a lot bigger in scale to the figures compared to what they were in the cartoon, because it's a toy. You have to have that toy aestheticness to it. So the weapon systems are bigger, so you see the detail a little bit better. Also, the originals had stickers on them. Well, not all of them, but you had stickers on some of them. And like I said, they were just bigger, and the details were more prevalent or more sculpted, more pronouncedly, because it was, it was meant to look like a child's toy.
Makes sense. Looking at, because I think we both have the figures in our hands right now, I do notice, even though I haven't played with the figures, that there's some like Max's elbows are getting a bit, easy to move, a bit loose. However, I have to say now that I'm just like fiddling with them, that they are, there's excellent posability, if you don't have to put them down on a flat surface. So yeah, they can do all sorts of yoga and all sorts of cool poses. But I would definitely say that if Ramen's listening, if Noel's listening, there's a there's an edge. There's a, I don't know, maybe Nick, you have a better word for this. At the bottom of his pants, there's this ridge. There's this really large and wide edge to the pants, which seems to limit the ankle joints. Yes. Yeah. And I think that should definitely be retooled. I would love to see the feet retooled to match more, like, because now it's more heavy arm, like actually armor commander. That's what they're called, or that's what they're called before. No, Jake is called the armor commander. That, my bad. But so they really look like they're like a Halo trooper, like something that's more heavily armored. And to me, like, just reduce that that armor feeling from the feet and from the lower legs, because then posability might be better, thus stability would be better for and it's unnecessary to have that wide brim at the end of the feet, because honestly, the original figures look less armored. And if you remember in the cartoons, and I don't want to be a nitpicking, thank you. I don't want to be a nitpicker and be like, well, it's not like it's in the cartoon and so they suck. No, that's not the idea. But my opinion is that if you remember in the cartoons, they could fold the exo frames as if they were just jumpsuits. These look far larger. I know this is a different interpretation. These don't look like these look like armors. These look like like combat grade armors, not something that you could fold and send to the laundry. So I think while the figures look nice, and I really like that they are they have a ton of what do you call them, pegs, where you can plug the weapons, connection ports, thank you, and which is really great because it adds a lot of replayability value if you want to play with them and combine the weapon systems. I do think that the lower legs and maybe like even the knees and the lower legs, the knees are they're really great with opposability, but just aesthetically, starting from the knees all the way down, my opinion is that they should feel lighter, they should feel more agile. If even the ankles can be fixed, I think that would really make an excellent V3 figure. But that's just me.
Now that you mention it, I'm holding my Ace McCloud figure in my hand, and I'm looking at it in different angles. And now you mention it, now it popped into my head. They're wearing bell bottoms.
Oh, disco era.
Yeah,
nice.
They're wearing bell bottoms, and the bell bottom here it does limit the articulation on the ankle. You get a rocker, but you're moving it centimeters. That's it. You know what I mean? It can pivot up and down centimeters. It's barely even noticeable for when you go to display the figure. So I would agree with you. The bell bottom look, or the super armored up look, I'm going to just call it a bell bottom. You know what I mean? I visually it's cool looking, but yeah, I see your point, man. It could have been, designed a little differently. And even if you try to put the legs straight, because of the way that like on Ace, I can't even get his legs standing straight. There's always a bend to his knee.
Yeah, and I have to, I totally agree with you. I have to say that, again, on the one hand, on the other hand, definitely kudos and points for the figures being so, flexible when it comes to, moving the arms, moving the torso, although there's no, as opposed to the GI Joes, the classified GI Joes, there's no ab crunch. Thank you. Yeah, you know all these expressions. There's no ab crunch. But otherwise, I can do all sorts of yoga with them. I can even do I can even fold their legs, as if they were, like a swami or something. So that's pretty impressive. Like, now that I play with it, I can do all sorts of like kung fu moves or kicks and punches. However, this is a question of like, can they keep that position when standing? And the answer is unfortunately not all the time.
Stand.
Yeah.
No, I mean, articulation wise, and I've seen people actually knock on the articulation on these figures online. I think the articulation is pretty fair on these figures. You get a pretty decent movement on the arms. You know what I mean? You can almost get a 90 degree on the elbow, which is impressive. You're not going to get the them kicking themselves in the ass where you can bend the back of their knee. It's not going to go that high, but again, they're armored up. I would expect anyone in any type of armor like this not to be able to pull off that move. You're not going to get the Van Damme splits. That is for sure. Yeah. But again, anyone in this armor, I can't picture you really trying to get a Van Damme splits. But for the most part, like I said, the arms are very articulate. Ab crunch, I don't know how they could have really pulled it off without hindering the sculpt big time.
Very true.
You know what I mean? So
yes,
I gave them a pass on that a long time ago when they were showing off the design. So if I'm going to nitpick it, the bell bottoms are my main issue. That's it. Everything else, man, I think the articulation is fair. The heads are you can get them posed up, down, looking up and down pretty nicely, but when you put the helmets on them, due to the bulkiness of the armor and the helmet, they can't look up. The helmet's going to want to split apart the second you do that. Now, do I want to fault Ramen Toys on that, or are you gonna? Because at what point do you sacrifice the design aspect of the figure to accommodate the articulation?
Nick, sorry, let me interrupt you for a second. I think if they're still in the process of thinking of new tools and retools for this, I think just elongating, or making the peg of the helmet head longer, so that it would kind of stick up a bit, so that if the helmet goes on it, there's more wiggle space than the regular on helmeted head. I think that would help, because basically like the prototype John Thunder comes in mind, that had that extra long neck. If you remember, there's that promo shot of that. So I'm thinking that maybe that would solve it, because then if you extend the neck, since the helmet is already on it, it wouldn't look too giraffe, but it would allow far more articulation. Because from a toy photographer's perspective, you cannot really do a flyby or a flying.
You can't do have them flying
vertical,
naturally.
yeah, because he cannot look forward. Now that I'm holding Max in my hand, I can essentially hold him without the mask and make him look like he's kind of looking down and a bit forward. But with the helmet, that's all impossible. So it works with the regular head. It might work with the long neck with the Bruce Willis head, with the helmeted head.
Maybe. And let's talk about that Bruce Willis head really quickly for a second here. A lot of people bashed the second head, and Noel, he put it really simply a long time ago. The reason being for that is that the hair, when a human being puts on a helmet, the hair compresses down, and and you got foam in the helmet, so you can squeeze it on your head. When you do it with an action figure, it's a different story. The hair is not flexible. It's not going to move. So doing a second head without the hair just to accommodate the helmets, to me, was not. It was actually a pretty good idea.
I think it was. Definitely. I think it was a brilliant idea.
Yeah,
I think
a lot of people bash that. Now, when we get the second version of these figures, there are going to. He already said no second head. Okay, there will be no Bruce Willis, or as I like to call it, the RoboCop head. Because they kind of look like RoboCop when he took off his headpiece.
Murphy.
Yeah, Murphy. He looks like Murphy. You're not going to get the Murphy head. Thank you, by the way. Yeah, no Murphy head. So I'm curious to see how these helmets are going to look on the second version. Are these helmets going to be are the heads going to look too big now?
I think I have a suggestion, Nick. My fan theory. Let's put it this way. My conspiracy theory is that I think they realized that it's cheaper to actually tool a helmet that integrates the actual head, as opposed to giving people, spending the money on extra plastic to give a Bruce Willis head. So, I think they just realized, well, we're retooling the helmet. Why not retool it from the inside as well? So we're saving money on not giving people the Bruce Willis head.
Right, but when you take the helmet apart and put it on the figure, and we'll go back to the Murphy example of RoboCop here, there is, there's no room for any hair for that, to be sculpted in. Now, I'm looking at the image right here on their website for the, 80s.
No, wait, there will be, like, with the upgrade kit. Yeah, I think that there will be new helmets. So no,
that's what I'm saying. There will be new helmets with new heads. But my question is when you put the helmet on the figure, is the head going to look look out of proportion?
No. Why would it look out of proportion? The helmet might.
Yeah, the helmet. That's what I'm talking about. When the helmet's on the figure, will the helmet look very unproportional? That's the whole point why he did the two heads, so you can maintain a proportional size head on the figure. So
my question to you is, how does it feel on the original figures?
Well, the original figures were more of a rubbery product, but yeah, if you actually look on the original figures, which you own them just as well as I do, yeah, the heads look a little bit big compared to the body. You know what I mean? They do. They definitely have more of a bell appearance. You know what I mean? Compared to the original, on the originals, because you got to compensate the hair and all that, and the thickness of the helmet, and they're definitely a little bit they're a little bit bigger than what they should be compared to the size of the body. So when you talk about the updated versions, I hopefully we're not going to have that problem. He found a way around it, but I don't know. The whole point of this whole part that we got into is that I was complimenting the idea of the second head to accommodate the figures to maintain a proportional head on the body, appearance. So, or helmet on the body. You know what I mean? So I was in favor of that, and I give them props for doing that. I know a lot of people just thought that was stupid. You know what I mean? And they kind of knocked that, but
I think it's a good idea.
I thought it was too.
So I would say that the more I play with these figures, the more I like them. It's not common that you could actually do the kind of like your fingers, what do you call that pose? When you like put your palms together and you like, put your fingers or, around each other, kind of like that mastermind, like ha 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 ha, moo ha ha, kind of pose. You could actually do that with these figures with the most open arms, because the arms allow for that much.
There's great articulation on these figures, man.
Yeah, so definitely. But if you listen to us, you could make it even more awesome if you retooled the lower legs.
Right, I get it, man. Get rid of the bell bottoms. You know what I mean? I would agree with you on that one, but it's what's done is done. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
I mean, like I said, that's me being nitpicky, and I don't want. You know what I mean? I'm fine with how it came out. Don't get me wrong, but if I really want to nitpick it, you know what I mean, that would be it. But other than that, I'm fine with how they came out.
You're being nitpicky.
I'm nitpicking it. That's going to be my term. I'm nitpicking it. So.
And the arms, I'm just liking these figures more and more. They can do these like kung fu moves where he's doing the whole like circling the arms and just getting into the combat pose. But I keep getting to the point where he's like doing the wah kind of move, and then I'm like, I cannot fix the ankles to do a nice like wide combat pose.
If I may quickly, I don't want. We don't have to get into it right now. You can finish what you're saying, but we need at some point we need to touch on the non-spring firing weapons. So
definitely
finish up what you were saying, though. By all means, man.
Thank you. Just one thing that I wanted to poll you on. What's your take on the pauldrons? Because I think when we were discussing the figures before their release, I think Mark did mention that unfortunately you cannot do the power extreme pose. You can kind of, sort of, or maybe
you can do it. You just gotta. It's the
you push up the pauldrons, and they are like fixed, molded in, or attached, fixed permanently to the figure. So
those can pop off.
They can pop off. Okay.
Yeah, that was pointed out in a review. So someone, in a review that someone else has done, that those can pop off. Would I recommend you trying to pop them off? It might be a different story, but they can. And I said it in. I wrote a review, which I believe if you're a member of the Centurions Power Extreme group, you might have seen. I posted a review on these figures about a month ago. And when you say pauldrons, are you referring to the shoulder pads?
Yes.
Okay. Though without those, I really feel like these figures would look like more like Jared Neo's artistic design of the like a Lego inspired figure. These guys would look like they have Lego torsos, like a big Lego brick for a torso. I feel that those shoulder pads were there to help balance out how the arms attach to the body, so it just doesn't look like these big round shoulders just sticking out of this like Lego block. So
yeah, it's kind of like makeup, on a woman during the date. It's to hide some blemishes, or hide.
Yeah, it's a padded bra. You know what I mean? It's a padded shoulder pads. Padded shoulder pads. They're padding on the shoulder pads. I'm okay with that. The Power Extreme pose. Can they do a natural power extreme where if you try to raise your arm right now, these figures cannot do it. If the cut for the swivel would have been a little gone out further, I think you could have achieved it. But to be fair,
I think they can. I have posed my figures,
and then you have to twist the bicep around. So it's not going to be a natural power extreme pose. You gotta have to manipulate the human. It's the human body a little bit to do it. But
no, I think it's possible. To me, it looks natural.
I tried. I can't get them up that high in the necks. You know what I mean? I can get them up, but they're not going to they're not going to go as high as they should be in the typical power extreme pose.
Okay,
you can do it. You just got to manipulate the joints. You can do it. But to be fair, I like what I was saying about that cut on the shoulder. Marvel or Hasbro doesn't even have that on their figures. So I'm not gonna, it's like, I'm not gonna. That'd be as we called it, nitpicking it. I'm not going to nitpick it. You know what I mean?
I would say that if we can provide some further helpful assistance with our opinions, I would say that maybe make the pauldrons more easier to detach.
Yeah,
Then
or a little
people
more
can
flexible material.
yeah, or people can decide if they want to have them on or not. Because of course, it definitely is a step away from the original figures.
But
I'm not saying it looks bad because
again, it goes with the modern artistic
yeah,
design.
definitely.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
So,
we agree on that. Yeah,
it doesn't bother me. Doesn't bother me at all.
yeah. Maybe if they get to a point where they retool the bodies to have individual bodies for the three figures as like version 3.0, maybe have different helmets, which we already have, different boots, different shoes,
Well, let's hope that
and maybe different pauldrons, along the
possibly.
line.
Let's just hope that we get more stuff released before they go that far in the 3.0 release. You know what I mean?
Okay.
The 2.0 release already so quickly has already stirred up the hornets' nest quite a bit. So hopefully we give it. They want to revisit the design in like in a year or two. That's that could be a whole different conversation right there.
Definitely.
One thing I'd like to mention though, the weapons.
Yeah.
A lot of people were very disappointed that they do not have spring firing missiles, that the torsos do not have the wind up gimmick where where it would shoot off a weapon and all that, or it would fire a weapon. Me personally, I don't care. I'm not big on toys that have gimmicks to them. I've never been big on that. I always felt a gimmick hindered the articulation or hindered the sculpt of a toy. So
let me use proper.
Gimmick, I can care less.
Let me use proper expressions, Nick. It's called this chest shaft. One of the things that actually I was also initially missing, but I totally get your point, and I think that from a certain perspective, these are collector's items. Another perspective, they're just toys.
Yeah.
From another third perspective, they're dolls. but essentially, if you look at again using the same example with GI Joe and with Transformers, they removed even the toys that are both for adult collectors and children, like the Generations line. They don't really have spring-loaded weapons that much. They have blast effects, but I think both for safety, which again is one of those things why I think international kids thought American kids were like pussies. I'm sorry, they were just weaklings, because we in Europe, we didn't have the whole like censorship on. The whole like you cannot use these spring-loaded weapons because you'll make someone go blind. No,
the child standards were a lot different. Apparently no one in Asia choked on the Battlestar Galactica missile while someone over here did. So the whole entire industry got turned around because of that.
Yeah,
spring-loaded weapons though, like I said, it doesn't. Me personally, doesn't bother me. For the fans that miss that feature and want it, I understand where they're coming from, and I'm not saying they're right. Saying they're wrong. I'm not saying nothing in the matter. It's just me. I can deal. I can live without it.
I would say that I wasn't even expecting it, because it's not a trend. I would have appreciated it like as a bonus feature. Like, hey, it also has spring-loaded weapons.
Well, I wasn't expecting it either, to be honest.
But I didn't expect it.
No, I wasn't expecting it. I think Mark was one of the very first people that I talked to when we first heard about these figures that was vocal about that, and I'm like, oh yeah, I could see your point, because I just assume, hey, like you pointed out, Transformers, GI Joe, none of them have spring-loaded weapons anymore. So I just assume, it didn't bother me, it didn't faze me. So I didn't even give the spring-loaded features a second thought. While Mark, and a few other people, they have, and like I said, nothing wrong with that, man. If that was one of the features that you really loved about the Centurion toy line that you would like to see brought back, well, hey, you're that's all right. You feel that way. That's your opinion. You're allowed to feel that way.
Yeah.
It's not right or wrong.
Also the same for the chest shaft. It allowed for some gimmicks. Although I would say they were like secondary gimmicks, because the main gimmick was.
Oh, but they were some fun gimmicks though, man. Bring out Detonator. Oh, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That Detonator, that was so awesome, man.
Yeah, but I just want, like, of course, and any criticism and all criticism is valid, but I just don't want Ramen Toys or Noel to get a heart attack or brain aneurysm or something with all these, why didn't you put that in or this in? But
Nah, yeah, I see where you're coming from as a disclaimer on that one. And like I said, yeah, for anyone listening, if your opinions differ from mine or Yuri's, that's fine. You know what I mean? They're toys. Everybody's allowed to have their opinion on the toy, what they would like to see or what they wouldn't like to see. And I would never, I'm not going to sit there and say you're right or wrong because you wanted spring-loaded weapons. It's your opinion. If you want it and that's what you missed, then it's fine, man. I'll have remorse for you on that. When I understand where you're coming from, but I would hate for anyone coming against coming out on get a message on Facebook and or in this Centurions group and be like, I can't believe you said that. It's like, well, dude, it's my opinion, man.
Yeah, I'm leaving the group. I'm leaving. Yeah, I'm a pro spring-loaded weapon guy, so I think it would have been nice to have the spring-loaded thing, the chest shaft, and everything. But I'm aware that they had to work with a finite budget, so they just didn't want to put it in. But anyways, Nick, let's move on. Let's check out some of the comments that guys left when we asked them in the Centurions group, like what their if they wanted to have anything mentioned in the podcast regarding just collector feedback. We specifically asked for people who own the toys, at least one, and there were some interesting comments. For example, Matthew Knight said they look good, not 100% on the heads, but what I would have really wanted is the same scale as the originals and with weapon systems that are compatible with the originals. I think Matthew has a really fair point here. So having them made in the original scale would have meant that down the line, if enough people are willing to pay for these figures, having replica weapons would have meant, or similar weapons would have meant that I haven't even actually thought of this before, that they would have only needed to buy a basic Jake figure from the vintage line, and then accessorize them, the base figures with the Ramen Toys weapons, if Ramen Toys made original scale figures. So that would have been a pro, but
if the parts would have lined up properly. Yeah.
Yes, that's all.
We
Yeah.
need to be mindful of that. The parts would have to be lining up.
Well,
properly.
I think for the chest cannon, there's only one peg. For a lot of guns and missiles,
if the peg,
missiles.
If you would have been able to be compatible, backwards compatible. You know what I mean? I think that's the proper way of wording it. Like when you're taking that, you're like a Super Nintendo game that can be run on a Nintendo, whatever. You follow what I'm saying?
Reverse
compatible.
Backwards compatible. Yeah. So
I think that would have been a great plus. That really, if they would have been in that scale and then reverse compatible, that would have been wonderful for a lot of collectors.
And I'm actually saying this again on one of those, additional pitches to Ramen. Like, imagine just releasing a weapons pack to augment the original figures and just selling that as like a bonus that's not compatible with the 80s commanders but compatible with the original figures.
If they were to do that going down the road, I think that would be let's put it this way. They're a business. They need a product to make money. They're in it, they're in it to make money. They're in it because they also love toys. That's great. I'm not questioning that. But bottom line of a business is you need to make money. So therefore, you have to have something to sell to make money. So if they wanted later down the road revisit the original Centurions, be like, okay, guys, we understand that a C-Bat is outrageously overpriced, and so we are going to design a C-Bat in our interpretation of a C-Bat, tweak it a little bit or something, whatever you want to do, and make it compatible to be fit for the originals, and specify that these are not part of the 80s commanders, but these are intended for, and you can't say Centurions because of copyrights, but you can say another 80s property, whatever. I think that'd be great, man. That if they want to go down that route and do, that'd be great. That'd be wonderful. I'm sure a lot of people would appreciate it, especially when you get to C-Bat and God, I'm having a mind blank right now. What the heck is Jake's weapon, the super expensive one, that everybody can't find.
Swing shot.
Swing shot, yeah, or even make up new weapon systems.
Yeah, totally. Like,
Oh, yeah, that'd be great, man. That'd be awesome down the road.
Or imagine, like, if someone is selling, I don't know, an old weapon system for like $2,000, just buy it, make copies of it, you reverse engineer it, and just like live off of that for the rest of your life or something.
One thing I sent Noel a message. I think I told you about this about a couple of weeks ago when they first announced that they were going to be working on their interpretation of Hacker and Wild Weasel, and said that they're not going to reissue the figures. Now, I don't want to get in that debate, like this, because I know that was a heated debate online about them reissuing version 2. They're not the same. They're in different colors, different heads. They're technically a different figure or a different variant of the figure. So, I don't want to get into that debate, but I told them that, hey, look, if you want, discontinuing the figures might not be such a good idea. If you're going to offer a weapon system, perhaps offer the weapon system with the figure included, and the only accessory. Don't give them so like with Jake, when you release Wild Weasel, offer Jake up with just a helmet, so you can display Jake in Wild Weasel. Because I don't know about you, but I have extra figures to display in all my weapon systems.
That's my thing. I do not have that many extra figures. So a lot of these, like, for example, Detonator, they just stand by themselves, because I don't have an extra Jake for them. So I could totally, understand where you're going with this, and I would agree.
But yeah, I suggested perhaps, like I said, sell the figure with just a helmet, because a lot of these figures you need just a helmet to complete that weapon system. Like, on Detonator, well, he didn't have Jake didn't have a helmet; he used his regular helmet. So,
and here's right, and here's the deal: if I don't know how the paint process works actually, like whether they just mold the figures and then how they actually paint them, but like a slightly different paint job, like how there was the Tiger Force for G.I. Joe, just maybe the same mold, but for Wild Weasel maybe add a camouflage or something.
Even to the figure itself.
Yeah. Just.
I can't say I agree with you on that one, buddy.
I'm just saying that if they're not sure about whether people would buy the extra figure with the new weapon systems, I think this wouldn't be an option B to
let's put it this way: for anyone listening, say something in the comments. Would you buy the weapon system? Would you prefer the weapon system to come with an extra figure to display that weapon system with, or would you just want the weapon system? Leave something in the comments so we can gather an interest on that.
Yeah, because especially now that since you mentioned Wild Weasel doesn't accommodate the helmet. So
okay, and that was a bad example, but like I said, Detonator, you need a helmet.
Hornet,
you need the helmet. Hornet actually. No. He didn't use the helmet. He used the canopy.
Depth Charger, no helmet.
Yeah, well, it depends on how you want to display him, though. I know some people prefer a helmet on Depth Charger. To me, I question it, but whatever. To me, that's that defeats the whole purpose of the canopy. But then again, that canopy doesn't have a bottom to it, and the water would just rush up and kill the man if he went underwater. But hey, whatever. So I don't know. That was my suggestion. Or offer the figures with just their helmets in a 3-pack. And you can purchase that separately. So, or just offer the figure with the helmet separately. So, let's say Wild Weasel is going to cost, I don't know, let's just throw a random number, $50. Okay, you order it. Also opt for pre-order if you want to combo it or supersize it like McDonald's here. Would you want the figure with the helmet for an additional $30 or additional $50?
Yeah, I think because Wild Weasel is larger, I think they would charge around $110 for the no early bird. I hope they will.
Oh God, no offense. I hope not. They don't charge $110 for just.
Think about it. Wild Weasel is way larger than Fire Force.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. It's also going to be a lot. It's not going to be as much plastic, and it's going to be more hollowed out. But
I mean,
I don't know, man. That's a good question. How much they're going to charge? That for that. That's a good question.
Yeah. So yeah. But anyways, we're close to wrapping up. We're almost at 2 hours. That's not good.
God, I feel bad for anyone that has to listen to this for 2 hours.
Oh,
Oh,
don't be so negative. Is there anything else? Just go through your mental notes that you wanted to mention.
Hacker. We're going to be getting their version of Hacker. That's going to be coming up too. Noel announced that with the news of their version of Wild Weasel, which I can't remember their names they're going with. And for the sake of everybody just knowing what we're talking about, I'm sticking with the original names. But we're getting their version of Hacker. So already they already posted a pic of one of their 3D designs for it. Noel posted one the other day of, I think, the back of it. I've seen him post a pic privately of the front of it from his screen, and it's looking good. Hacker's looking good. You know what I mean? The question is, when they go to do Doc Terror, you're just gonna do a simple reverse the 3D print and do it back. And for Doc Terror, I don't know. We'll wait and see. But Hacker's looking pretty good. I'm very eager to see how that figure is gonna look.
Yeah, it looks somewhat different, but also close to the original. So I would say that definitely it's something to look forward to.
Noel, if you're listening, I would like to add the constructive criticism that as one of our members of the Centurions group pointed out, that at the end of the weapon looks like a can opener. So on a can opener, I can talk right now. Wow. On the can opener part of that of his arm attachment, put an XXO on it. You know what I mean? For the kitchen products, that'd be just a nice little comical nostalgia. You know what I mean? A little piece for comical purposes.
I'm not exactly sure. This is just a footnote whether this is happening because Nick didn't have his drink today or because he did have his drink today. So
no. I haven't had my drink yet.
Let's avoid the impression that we're just talking to Ramen Toy, because no, we're actually talking to you guys who are
right. I did like I stated. If you're listening,
before we go into the realm of will there be a pullback mechanic for Wild Weasel, or whether a Vic figure, Mark's favorite, would one day be released. I don't know. Did we actually discuss completely the V2 figures, Nick?
No, we touched up on that, and we have mentioned it, but we haven't really got into that conversation. And
okay.
Like I said, I don't want to get into the negativity that was surrounding all that. You know what I mean? It was, but
no, we can. I think we should. We're doing justice to both our listeners, especially our listeners.
Let me restate that. I don't want to be like contributing to the hate mongery of that. However, I've said this publicly in the Centurions group that that releasing the version 2 figures this quickly is a bad idea. In my opinion, it was not a good idea on their part. If it had been 6 months to a year down the road, it would be a whole. It'd be a different story. But there are a lot of people that are at the time of the release of that information that still did not get these figures in hand because they went with the e-packet shipping, and depending on their location, and you got to remember, we just got off the holidays. The pandemic has put a delay on everything. That some people were still waiting to get their hands on these figures because they ordered them from also a secondary company. They didn't order them directly from Ramen. They ordered them from like another toy store, so they didn't get the figures in their hand. So to announce that, okay, look, there is a huge majority of you figure. Let me restate that. I don't want to use the word majority because I really have no proof on that. But there was a large part of the Centurion community that wanted these figures to be available in the original colors and wanted more iconic looking helmets to the original. Well, we're gonna give them to you, and we're gonna offer them in a 3-pack and all that. That's great for anyone who did not buy these figures. That's wonderful information. That's great news. But for the people who did pay $90 plus $60 to get these things shipped, and then you're going to release that information that quickly, that's like, ow, you know what I mean? My wallet hasn't even recovered yet, man. And I get it, you know, your business, you need to make money, but bad timing. You should have held off on that announcement for at least 6 months, you know?
I think we should look at it from, again, we don't know the facts. We haven't been told the facts. That's why Ace's presence, or maybe a future discussion, would be
That's true.
in order.
That's a good point.
Here's my perspective on that. So this was a low budget project initially, that needed the initial funds, and I understand that because making toys, making custom molds, and shipping them and preparing everything properly, and having customer service, etc., costs money. So my assumption was that, like Noel referred to it, the early bird people who got it cheaper, like I did, supported Ramen Toy by providing funds so that they would be able to, create new molds. They would be able to, get their business rolling faster, get some profits coming in faster. So we took the risk of, maybe not seeing anything for our money and losing our money, because the way they set up PayPal, and Nick actually highlighted this to me, is that we needed to pay with the early bird option so early, like last spring, I think, that by the time the figures got here, we would not, if no figures are sent to us, we would have not been able to get a refund from PayPal due to PayPal's limit on how many months you can go without asking for a refund. So we were brave enough to take that risk, and it paid off because we got the figures and we got them cheaper. However, the thing is that I think what happened was, once money started coming in, so initially they commissioned the version 1 heads, but they didn't have money, I think, to commission a new pair of, or new trio of heads. So essentially they produced these. And then once money was coming in and interest was high, they realized, hey, why don't we just create a new set of heads? Now, true, on the one hand, you could say, Nick, that they could have just delayed the release, but from my perspective, I'm happy that they're actually, giving us the new heads faster. They can sell more stuff, they can invest more into the new molds, and they can have more people satisfied with their product. The only mistake they made, and I think this was not intentional, Ace did post, or Noel, once a sarcastic apology, and then again based on how he phrased it, a more honest explanation. And I think a lot of times, and this is not necessarily a good thing, and let's give credit and let's give criticism where they are due. He kind of maybe was a bit too involved emotionally in this thing and wanted to set things straight while also being honest and being transparent. He got sometimes maybe a bit too excited. But the thing is that he just made a business mistake and made up for it. Like, would it be better to not offer the heads and just tell the initial buyers like you and me, hey guys, just pay,
just to clarify, you're referring to the additional heads and helmet pack that
No,
would
I haven't gotten there. No.
Oh,
What I mean is, like, it's way better, and I think most toy manufacturers wouldn't do this. That of course they are releasing a new set of heads and helmets with the version 2 figures, which are painted different, but they also offered as a way to make up to the version 1 buyers to have heads and helmets in the old colors so that they could upgrade their figures without investing in the new figures. Now, of course, the new figures will have the new heads, the new helmets, and the new paint jobs, or the more cartoon accurate paint jobs. I think they just had money to commission one trio of figures, and then after they started producing it, I think they just got the idea to update it immediately, so that instead of let me just finish, as opposed to releasing the version 1 figures again as a second production run, they will not release them. They will update. So the second production run would actually be the updated figures. So they have this challenge. They want to sell more figures because the interest is there. That's point number one.
Earlier. They're a business.
They're a business. Yeah, if there's demand, then let's ride that wave. Now, point number 2, they have either the option to sell the old molds, which are less accurate and people will continue complaining, or they retool them like they did. And the new figures would be more cartoon accurate. I think in this tight situation, they made the right choice, although they could have just created the version 2 molds instead of the version 1 molds on day one. But that's a mistake that they did, and they're trying to make up for it the best way they can. So I think this is one of the better options. And of course they're offering the set of heads separately for the old figure owners, and they're offering the new figures to people who haven't bought them yet. So I think they're just trying to make the best of the situation. They could have been more transparent. I think that's a good lesson for them to ponder on, and something to keep in mind for the future. But right now, I think they're making the best of what they can, and I support them.
Um, I do believe Noel came out and said that yes, this is, and I touched upon this a while ago in this conversation or earlier in this podcast, that at the time, this is all they can afford to get. This is what, like, the quality the sculptor was able to give them, and that's what they got. As money came in from the sales, they were able to churn over some of that money and reinvest in updated heads to back up what you're saying. He did come out and say that, which is, dude, again, that's great. That's wonderful. I think that's fantastic of a company. Always work on improving your product. You know what I mean? No matter what, no one's product is going to be perfect the first time around. There's lessons to be, there will always be something caught later down the road where you didn't realize maybe a mistake was made, and you can always improve on it, or just you're always going to find a way to improve something. So that's great. Again, I will still stand by my original comment that the timing of it was they could have waited, but whatever. At the same time, they're a business. They need to make money. Now, with this improved heads and more accurate cartoon / toy colors, and not any of the dirt and the weathered appearance, there are a lot more people that commented on Instagram, on their Facebook page, and in the Facebook group that they're on board for these figures now. Originally, they were not on board to buy these figures because they didn't like the colors that they were casted in. They didn't like the subdued colors. They didn't like the head sculpts. Now with more cartoon style colors, or more accurate sculpted helmets and more, I use this term loosely, accurately sculpted heads. But the helmets,
Cartoon accurate heads.
Yeah, I use that term loosely because they're still not like all that. Max looks more like J. Jonah Jameson from Spider-Man. But anyways, you got more accurate colors. There are people that are now on board for these figures. There are people that did not want to buy them that are now going to buy them. They're So yeah, no, it's great. They got people to buy them. That's their business, and that's their whole point. You got people that originally did not want them that now want them. So they accommodated and corrected, that coloring issue for the people that want, that waited. And hey, man, that's great. You're going to get the figures you want. So there is a positive for them releasing these figures. I'm not blind and say that, it was completely stupid and it was an overall bad decision. No, not at all. They got people into this line. So that's wonderful. With more sales, hopefully that can get us more weapon systems down the road and get them done, get them in a more faster time.
Right. And just to highlight something, I think this might be important in this discussion. Think about this line of figures as if it were like an Indiegogo or a Kickstarter campaign. So essentially, you're funding something, but instead of Ramen Toy asking for the money up front, even before any physical tooling began, they're like, no, we're just selling these. And so there was like, if 20 people ordered it, they would still be a pressure for them to produce the toys. So essentially, you see a lot of, I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with the Kickstarter projects or Indiegogo projects. A lot of these, you send them your money and you don't see the fruit of your investment for years. Sometimes you never see the fruit of your investment. I did once back a futuristic looking toothbrush, and I was considering investing into or funding a compact bicycle helmet. Now these were both in late 2018, I think late 2018. And that was 4 years ago. None of these projects materialized. At least they haven't shipped yet. So that's a 4 year delay. Consider this: you invested in Ramen Toy. You invested in the future of the rebirth of potentially of the Centurions line. As a third party series of figures. Um, they made some mistakes at the beginning. Their performance isn't 100%, but they delivered the figures in about a year of time, and the figures are pretty acceptable. Figures, I think the consensus is that they're pretty good. They're not perfect. Again, I have issues, for example, with the scale, because if I put them next to any of my Marvel figures, and I have a few, they look tiny. They look tiny compared to female figures, tiny compared to male figures. They look like high schoolers somewhat, or just Italian people. I'm sorry, I'm part Italian, so I can say that. Well, you should do a genetic, test for whatever. I'm just kidding. So, essentially, the figures are more or less, okay. They're good. They're enjoyable, and they're not perfect. But think of it as like, hey, you invested in a company, a startup. They didn't fold. They delivered what they promised so far on, and they announced new products, which definitely show improvements to the original molds. Now, your initial investment brought you another set of figures. If you like them, keep them. If you want to upgrade them, you're free to buy the heads separately and the helmets, because they're going to do one production run for those. And if you have the money to invest to buy both figures, do so, and get both set. And think of it as, you can display them as original Centurions versus Neo Centurions, or reboot Centurions, or you could replace the heads and buy the version 2 figures, and then simply have alternative colors, like they do with a lot of Transformers figures or GI Joe figures. You can also sell the original figures on eBay, possibly making a profit on them. I don't know how many have sold so far, and then just with that money, buy the Wave 2 figures, especially if you're in the US, but potentially if you're in the UK as well. So you do have options, but I think maybe they haven't expressed this, and I don't want to speak on their behalf, but I think Ramen Toy definitely appreciates your business. And I think even though maybe Noel has, I feel that, that's a mistake, that sometimes he was too um, temperamental a bit, or too involved emotionally in the situation. But it's also a learning process for him, and so far they delivered on what they promised. They never really overpromised, so you saw what you would get. Of course, as a side note, we would be happy to get some advanced copies of the next wave of figures, so that we could show people what it's like, and definitely show people if and what improvements there are. But there were reviews, so you could see what you're getting at what you're not getting. So there was no no unexpected quality drops in the figures or anything that wasn't announced. Of course, the new figures could have been announced in a different way, but again, we're just repeating ourselves. It is what it is. So
Yeah. I'm going to quickly touch on what you said about scale, which needs to be really noted for Hasbro is they're not that great on scaling their own figures. They got, let's, in the 6-inch scale figures, they got GI Joe Classified, they got Ghostbusters Plasma, Power Rangers Lightning Series, I believe is the name of the line, and Marvel Legends. So you got 4 set of figures right there. If you're going to take all, like, various figures from all 4 of those lines and all those figures that do a lineup on them, they're all at different heights. Ghostbusters, if I remember correctly, are shorter than GI Joe Classifieds. All of them are generally, this figures are slightly smaller, and Legends are generally a little bit taller than Classifieds. Heck, you have Captain America figures in the Legends line that are all different scales, completely different height levels, and these are like ones based on from the movie. and they're all completely different height levels of the Chris Evans style figure. So is it fair to knock Ramen Toys for being shorter than Marvel? They said they're putting the figures in a 6-inch scale. They gave us what they promised. Or is it Hasbro is too big? You know what I mean? I've talked to a few collectors of modern toys because I'll be honest, I'm not much of a modern toy collector. I've been recently getting into the G.I. Joe classifieds, and I only have like a small handful of Legend figures, and they're all Captain America, so they're all different height levels from each other. So, from me talking to other collectors, Marvel's all over the place with their scaling. You can't really call Marvel a 6-inch action figure scale because they don't even follow their own scale. They're everywhere on that. So I don't know if that's Ramen Toys' fault for not being up to scale with Marvel or not, but that should be noted that Marvel is or Hasbro's all over the place on their scales.
No, I'm not really blaming. I mean, partially I am because they actually made the decision, the final decision, being the producers of the toys. But I don't see a reason to stick for the Marvel scale because there were like there's a good how should I put it? There's a general idea already what the Centurions figure looks like. So deviating from that, I think there should have been a better reason than just everybody does 6-inch figures.
Oh no, I hear you, man. Let me ask you this question, by the way.
Yep.
When you got these figures in hand and you took them out of the package, how weird did it feel to you holding a Centurion figure that small? To me, it felt weird, man. I was like, I'm used to Centurions being these big, beefy, massive figures, and now I'm holding these 80s commanders, and I mean, yeah, they're supposed to be Centurions. Let's face it. They, that's what they're supposed to be representing, or being an interpretation of. So I'm holding this figure, and then I'm like looking at Centurion. I'm like, this just does not feel right in my hand, and it's no knocking Ramen Toys quality. It's just like you said, the scale. You know what I mean? You went from 6-inch to what, 7 or 8-inch? I don't even remember what they were. You know what I mean? You went from a much bigger, beefy figure to a smaller, moderate size figure. It felt weird, you know?
Interesting. I think for me, the reason why they didn't feel weird was that I wasn't really considering them Centurions figures. I was like, it's an homage. It's a tribute to Centurions. So I didn't really feel like these would be on the same shelf as my original figures. Additionally, while like I said, I'm more of a Transformers / GI Joe collector, being a young person with no kids so far and no responsibilities beyond supporting myself, I tend to sometimes just splurge and buy stuff that I like. So I'm not a fan of the Marvel universe, not a fan of the DC universe neither. I don't like superheroes at all. But sometimes I just buy figures because I like them. So my shelves have various scales of figures. So I can say that right now, if I look at on my shelf, I see the vintage size GI Joes. I see the classified GI Joes, 2 different scales. I see a Johnny Cage action figure. I see Marvel action figures, Shadowcat, Rogue. I see Combiner Wars figures.
I follow what you're saying, man.
Even with
toy collector, figures were all over the place too.
Even with Transformers, unless you look at the Masterpiece or the not even the War for Cybertron, this most recent wave of figures or line of figures, they don't even match each other when it comes to scale. So I don't really pay attention to that, and especially because of this, I don't really see a reason why I should can be concerned if my Centurions at 8 inches are larger than the Marvel figures, because they're not the same universe. There's no, like, of course I could put them next to Tony Stark Iron Man, but even Iron Man is completely different. What I did was, I made a few comparison pictures, and honestly, again, the more I think about it, the more I'm incredulous about why this needed to be scaled down to 6 inches.
Like I said in the beginning of this podcast, to me, it didn't matter. If they would have stuck with the original scale, I would have been happy with it. They got smaller. I'm fine with it. I mean, I could get into that. I think me and you have, and I've expressed my opinion, but I don't want to bored our poor listeners. But I can get into a debate about why, as a kid, I loved it when all figures were around the 3/4 inch scale, because, like, for me, Star Wars figures were the supporting cast for G.I. Joe. You know what I mean? They weren't like Luke Skywalker wasn't playing the role of Luke Skywalker. He was playing a role of someone like a prisoner of war, or he played a role of a bystander that got in the fight between Cobra and G.I. Joe. You follow what I'm saying? So, I liked it when all figures were kind of the same scale, because then you can have more. You can bring more into your toy universe with your imagination. Centurions were such an odd scale that there was nothing to play or to substitute a character with. You follow? You know what I mean? I couldn't use anyone for a supporting role. But again, like I said, I don't care. 6-inch original scale. I would have been happy either or. I'm. I mean, they went with 6. I'm happy with 6. They fit in my DTOF cases better at 6. So I'm happy. I don't care. Actually, I take it back. The originals fit in the DTOF cases better. Was the height level for the shelf, but I'm happy with what they gave. The scale that they went with. I don't care.
I have to say, Nick, I get your point. It's also part. It was part when we had the discussion with you guys and possibly Alton, when we were trying to decipher why Centurions only lived for 1.5 waves. 2 seasons. Why it went away? Why it wasn't successful? And one of the possible reasons, was that the scale made the toys too expensive, and possibly they didn't really go well with the other figures. Although we have to say that Mask was smaller than G.I. Joe, probably with as much as Centurions were taller than G.I. Joes. So, and also, when you look at playability, like, you're not a child. You don't buy these figures for children. And that's why, just like how spring-loaded weapons were removed, because that's the trend for collectors nowadays. This, for the same reason, there's no reason to consider play factor with these figures. But anyways, I think we discussed these figures in detail. If I would, as a final verdict, give my assessment as a Centurions collector, I would give them 4 stars out of 5. I'm not completely satisfied, but what I did get is satisfactory. So I'm happy with the figures, and I'm looking forward to ordering and actually receiving the replacement heads, which I might or might not display, and the Brave 2 or version 2 figures, and the announced figures and whatever is beyond. As a toy collector, I'm afraid I would have to give them 3.5 stars, or 3.5 stars, because again, and actually now we deciphered it on air. The plastic, and more likely the ankle joint, and the limited movement really hinders the figure, and there were some QC issues. So that's the more non-Centurions fan but toy collector and toy expert perspective. What's your final verdict, Nick?
I'm happy with them. And as I pointed out in a previous review I made, I'm not going to tell you what's worth your money, because dollar has a different meaning to different everybody. If you love Centurions and you're a big Centurions fan, this is the first, other than Jarek Neo's really cool custom Lego figure, this is the all you got. I mean, you might argue and say you got bootlegs in the past, but we're not going to go there. These are, first action figures that we've gotten since the 80s. To me, I'm happy fiddling with them. I'm happy posing them. I love the way they look in my display case. I change around the poses on them quite often, and they pose really nicely. They look good. I'm happy with them. I really am. I would like to see more from this company. I look forward to seeing more from this company. The quality of the plastic used, I would like to see them use better material. better plastic. You know what I mean? So like the joints don't just pop, like the arms don't pop out or the wrist pegs don't pop out easily. I feel those are QC issues with the quality of the plastic they use, or perhaps maybe because the mold, the type of mold. Like I said, I would love to know if they use steel molds or silicone. I don't know. It's only a suspicion that it was silicone, but I would recommend them if you're a Centurion fan. If you're a casual 6-inch collector and you just want to, because I know there are people out there that are 6-inch collectors and they buy anything in that scale that looks cool. For their price point, you might want to pass on them. You're probably not, you know what I mean? You might be a little disappointed with them just because of the quality of the plastic. But if you like, again, you're a Centurions fan, they're worth it.
Yeah, that's actually a good perspective, whether we recommend it or not. I would say that definitely, if you're a Centurions fan, like think about it this way. The series is exactly, and the toy line is exactly 35 years old, at least, comparing 86 to 2021. So, this is the first relatable toy line to Centurions since the show and the toy line ended. So, if you want Centurions figures and you don't want to pay the excessive prices on eBay, buy these. If you are just a casual collector, not really interested in Centurions or not that much, I would agree that it's a pass. But if you would like to see more Centurions, I think just as a show of support, they are business, so they don't need your emotional support, but essentially to show that there's interest in these figures, at least buy one, or maybe all three if you feel like. But think about it from this perspective. If you would like to see maybe Rex Charger, John Thunder, the rare weapon systems, Swing Shot, Seabat, or even things like Detonator happen.
Give me Crystal Cane, damn it!
And Crystal Cane, a company needs to have incentive to make these figures. We do know that since so many legal entities are involved in the Centurions copyright, only third-party figures are possible at this point. No first-party figures, essentially no Hasbro figures, no Warner Brothers figures.
That's a damn good point.
So if you want to get them, and if you want future figures to happen, this is an investment. This is showing a company that yes, we want these toys. And think about it like this: even if you don't like Ramen Toys, if you have issues with how Noel / Ace treated the fandom, treated the collector community, or you have any beef with any of the toys issues or aspects, think of it from a perspective of a toy company. If they see that Ramen Toys are selling these figures and are developing new figures and new molds, maybe another toy company will also jump on the bandwagon, and we might have two rivaling lines. And maybe there's Ramen Toy, and I don't know, there's Macaroni Toys will also develop.
I'm going to quickly interrupt you on that. It's like your Transformers. You have Fans Toys, Masterminds, Fans Toys, Masterminds, Ocular Max. There's some, or a Bad Cube, whatever, MCC. You got multiple third-party companies making the same. They're copying the same identity. They're making Transformers. So
yes.
Maybe in the future we might see Ramen Toys might have a competition. You know what I mean?
Yeah, which would be honestly, which would be great, because that shows that there's interest from the fans, from the collectors, and it as capitalistic as it sounds, it would force Ramen Toys and both the competitor and them to improve, step up their game, and the only way to do that is to basically show that there's interest in these figures, and not on the eBay type sites where there's no proof that there's demand for these figures. And also, Nick, just one more thing to add, since you brought up third-party producers or manufacturers for Transformers, there's also companies like Perfect Effect or Dr. Wu who create additional parts for existing Hasbro made toys.
Dr.
So
Wu
maybe,
makes some really
yeah,
cool stuff, man.
yeah. So imagine if maybe Ramen Toys is successful with this line, um, they might some company might step up and be like, hey, we're not making Ramen Toys competitive figures, but we're making old weapon systems again for the original
Hey,
figures
you don't
as
even
an
need a company. You could have someone 3D print the stuff. You know what I mean? You can have some ambitious person at home, come up with the plan to be like, hey, I'm going to offer a slingshot here. You want me to print it for you? Whatever. This is the price. You want to print it yourself? Here's the file.
Well, technically, there is a Latin American member of the group who I won't name to avoid people, harassing him or anything.
He does. He's done for
Uh,
vintage.
he recreated all the vintage figures, I think, and all the weapon systems. At least I've seen John Thunder, maybe also,
He's done a Phantom, whatever it's called, for Max Ray. Yeah,
Fathom Fan.
yeah, Phantom Fan. He's done. He's done for the originals, and
Yeah,
his work is absolutely amazing. Absolutely
yeah.
amazing. I don't know if he's selling it or not, but and they're amazing. Someone else has also done them and sold them on their website, and they're asking prices absurdly ridiculous. But someone else has done them too, and they're great. But I'm sure someone might look at these 80s commanders and decide, I'm not gonna, I can wait for Ramen Toy to do it, or I'm gonna do it now. So
Yeah, and think about it like this also. Ramen Toys is working on releasing their second brand of toys, which is a third-party Silverhawks line. At least they created one figure so far that they're selling or pre-selling. So they're also jumping on other bandwagons because they're not the first company to work with that with Silverhawks. And so essentially, it's about showing interest in the toy. Again, this is not the best reason to buy the toy. They buy the toy if you like them, but know that if you want to see future figures, this is the way to go.
pretty much, yeah. You want to see more from the company, you gotta support the company. But time will tell.
Yeah. So that's a lesson for you. To Ramen Toys, that there's a lot of lessons to take note of, but I think they're on the right path. And even if the road was bumpy, hopefully there's a bright future for both the Centurions fandom, collectordom, and for Ramen Toys. So yeah, not a perfect project, bottom line, but a very good indication of the possibility of Centurions toys, and a reason for optimism. So yes, any final thoughts, Nick, or should we
No,
just say
no.
bye?
I think that's about it, man. We expressed our opinion. I think the only thing I didn't mention, and you mentioned, you touched on it, but it sparked a gear in my head that other than a figure stand, blast effects would have been nice to have with these figures.
Definitely blast effects, yeah, or at least the capability. But maybe that might happen down the
So
line.
yeah, somewhere down the road, someone's gonna make it. This might be compatible, so we'll just wait and see.
Definitely.
But other than
But
that, like I said, I already went over my opinions, man. I don't want to, bored
yeah,
everybody. You know what I mean? Saying that, going over the same thing over and over again.
absolutely. So guys, thank you so much for listening to us. It's been a pleasure, talking to you about these things. Maybe it was a bit long, but I think we did justice to the figures, highlighting both the good and the bad. Thanks, Nick, for joining and for taking the time. And we'll see you guys, or hopefully meet you guys on the Facebook group very soon. Please do leave the comments that you might have under this video, whether it's YouTube, your favorite podcast platform, or on Facebook.
And hold on,
And,
if anyone wants to get a hold of you or discuss anything about what you might have said or offer a suggestion other than comments, how can they get a hold of you?
oh, that's a good point. So basically,
And I know, give us your Tinder profile link.
I don't know if you can do that, but no, I'm definitely not going to share my furry dating profile either. No, it's so we have our Facebook page for Man and Machine Podcast Xtreme. That's the Centurions podcast that you're listening to, and you can also find my toy photography or connect me through my toy photography Facebook page. That's hashtag, as in Hasbro and Takara, hashtag crack That's also available on Instagram, but the Facebook page is more updated. How about you, Nick? What if guys wanna get in touch with you?
Um, I'm on Facebook. You can find me in the Centurions Power Xtreme Buy, Trade, and Sell group. I'm very active in that group. You can find me in there or on my Instagram page. My Instagram is Nico Pelli 77 NICOPELLI 77. You can get a hold of me there. I usually share just random toy pictures of toys that I own or toys that I would like to own one day, or my amateur toy photography. So you can find me on those two locations.
Yeah, awesome. So thank you for your attention, and let's wrap up this episode, and let's have our co-host Mark yell the catchphrase of the series. Until the next time, guys, Power Xtreme.
Power Xtreme, guys. Take care. Power Xtreme!